Everybody's got a story. You just have to listen. Hola, I'm Joe Pardavila, and this is Good Listen. And you know how, people make fun of weather people because it's the only job in the world where you don't get fired for being wrong? Well, what's it actually like to be a weather person? Because if you go to any city in America, the meteorologist is usually more famous than the anchor. I mean, look at the Today Show. Hosts have come and gone, but Al Roker has been there forever, and people just love him. So today I've got Amy Freeze on the show. I've known her for years. We met in New York City when she was working at WABC TV, but she's worked in other major cities like Philadelphia and for the Fox Weather Channel. So I want to find out what made her fall in love with weather and how she became a weather person with the name Amy Freeze. Amy Freeze, welcome to Good Listen. How are you?
Terrific. You look great, Joe.
Oh, thank you very much, Amy. And you look great as usual. I think we're technically the same age. We're not going to divulge what it is, but I think we're exactly the same age, which is, listen, at this point, and again, I'm not going to say our age, but at this point, this is the age when we were children. Don't do that. Don't do that. We're the age when we were kids. This number seemed ancient, like you were literally going to be put out to pasture. So
Right.
I feel like we're pulling off our age.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it. I will say this, I feel like life's just beginning. So you're right. It did seem like it was far off. It would be ancient, but and also just to think about that number seemed crazy, but now I feel like things are just getting going. And believe it or not, I have a son who is old enough to be married, and he's been married for 2 years. I am pressuring him incredibly because I would like to be a grandmother.
Okay, yeah. Well, we're going to get into the family side of things because for people who don't know, you are straight out of Central Mormon casting, where you have a bushel of kids. We'll talk about that, but first, I want to start with weather, which is sort of
Okay.
your bag. And I will say you're very fortunate to be in weather because it's the last topic of conversation we can still all have. I
Right.
often joke that we can't talk about anything anymore. We can't talk about favorite TV shows because there's a million of them. Movies, nobody goes to them anymore. Politics, forget about it. But weather is the last thing you could talk to you could talk about weather with anybody on the planet and have an engaging conversation. So good job, Amy Freeze.
Weather is the last subject standing. It truly is. I mean, when I think about weather conversations in New York, it's the first thing you talk about when you get in the elevator. You might recognize your neighbor's face, but you really don't know their name. But you can always have a conversation with them about weather. You probably know their dog's name, but just talking about the weather is something you can do with anybody, anytime. And the other crazy thing is that it makes headlines. Everybody tries to put politics first, so they try to put a crime story first, but people just want to know the weather.
Yeah, and it's so funny too because I know a lot of people push back on the idea of small talk, but when you think about it, you just broke it down. Like we really can't talk about anything else other than this when it comes to small talk. So let's get in because I think knowing you for as long as I have, I know that your name gets a lot of talk because they think because you're a meteorologist, TV weather person, that you change your name to be on television as a weather person with this awesome name, Amy Freeze. And I know you've said this story 1,000 times, but it's as simple as it's your family name.
I was born this way. My dad is Mr. Freeze. He's not Arnold Schwarzenegger, but he is definitely Mr. Freeze. I have nieces and nephews. They call me Annie Freeze. I have a long list of weather jokes. But honestly, if I was a lot of people in radio and television, they change their names or they come up with something clever to be the name. If I was to choose my name, I would have chosen Wendy Breeze. And I could be a Florida forecaster and I would have been in a warm climate.
That's right. Did you ever do one of those? Because I don't think I've asked you this, but did you ever do an ancestry? Where's the Freeze name come from? Because it's not common. I think you're the only person that I've ever seen with that name. And again, people will probably run into you think you made it up. But how many generations does Freeze go? Do you know?
Yeah, Freeze goes back several generations, at least 5 that I know of, probably a little bit further, but I believe it has some German connotation to it that was spelled Freis, and then eventually the name changed, etc. But I don't know a whole lot. That'd be on my dad's side going back. There is a lot of genealogy, but I don't know exactly where it changed. So
Okay.
somewhere along the lines.
And you say you were born this way, and you were born with this name, and then weather happened. Can you tell me along that journey of Was it one of those things where like, man, I got the name, I might as well do this for a living? Like, when did you fall in love with the idea of weather and making it your profession?
I resisted a little bit. I didn't really grow up knowing I was gonna be a forecaster. A lot of weather people say, "Oh, I was 10 years old and I was out there with an anemometer chasing tornadoes." No. I grew up, I wanted to be a veterinarian first. Then I went to school for journalism. I wanted to be a newspaper writer. I thought Wall Street Journal, Boston Globe. I actually did study abroad in South Africa and Germany, both because I wanted to write about small factional political groups that were, basically a small column in the back of the newspaper. So that's what I thought I wanted to do. And I fell in love in college. And when I was getting married my senior year, he was done. And so I went and talked to my counselor and I said, I need to graduate as soon as possible. And he said, well, if you switch from print journalism to broadcasting, you would have to skip the ethics classes, but we can get you right through and you'll have a degree.
Wow.
So that's how I switched over to broadcasting. I did an internship at KTLA Morning News in Southern California and Los Angeles at the time. They were just debuting the live local 3-hour morning show. And so I had an amazing experience there. It was also the time of the O.J. Simpson trial. So I got a really good look at how TV worked. And I thought, okay, well, maybe I could be a writer or reporter or something along those lines. We went up to Portland, Oregon. I got a job at the local TV station, and the main meteorologist had triple bypass surgery. His name was David Apple. And they said, who's going to help us do weather? And in walked the part time writer, Amy Freeze. That sounds like weather. Go up to the weather deck. I was mortified. I was like, I don't know anything about the weather. This is crazy. But I enrolled in Portland State University's oceanography. And from there, I went on and got a second degree. So, long story short, the weather chose me.
Well, like you said, you were born this way. And I wonder for folks watching this, and maybe the title of the YouTube video is like how to be a weather person, but like tell me about that sort of, because again, anyone could be a weather person on TV, but to have that AMS, a meteorologist title, you have to go to school for. So tell me about the school part of it all.
Yeah, that was not easy because while I started the class, the idea was we'll make Amy learn how to do the weather by everyone staying after the broadcast is over on Friday and Saturday nights for 10 to 15 minutes. You can imagine how popular that made me. That's how they started to teach me. But as far as knowing what to say, I had to literally study the weather right from the beginning. And I did classes at Portland State, I did classes at Metro State in Denver when I moved there. I finally finished my degree with Mississippi State University, but I had to live in Starkville, Mississippi for about 8, 9 weeks for a quarter to finish that degree. And it was the hottest I've ever been in my life. It is crazy the way the humidity is down there. It's all the way through August. And then following that, I got a job in Philadelphia and it was a perk at NBC at the time. We will pay for your education. So you choose a university and we'll pay. So I was like, what's the most expensive college in Philadelphia? And so I got a master's degree at University of Pennsylvania while I was there. So once I got the bug of learning in the classes, I just kept going, which is crazy strange because in college, I could barely pass physical science.
Wow.
True story. I don't know. I had to turn around. I had to turn around after my first degree. So
Well, like
there
it
you
could
go.
have been the fact that you went to so many goddamn schools that it was hard to keep up. So all right, so for folks who want to be weather people, what are the key degrees? And again, you probably don't need it, but what are some of the degrees that you would probably go and fill out for?
No pun intended, but the degree that I would suggest in this day and age is to get a degree in some sort of marketing, some sort of production, because it's one thing to be a communicator and you got to have a knack for that naturally, but you really need to know how to enterprise, to write, and then to produce and spread whatever you come up with. So to me, it's a lot different now than it should be, but a lot of the universities still have a broadcast journalism degree. They have a performance degree. They have meteorology degrees. If you really want to be a great scientist, I say go for the meteorology degree and then pick up the communication skills along the way. And then the other big piece of advice, and I think you would agree with this, Joe, when you're in school, start producing stuff, start creating your social media, your stories, whatever, even if it's about your family, your friends, your own surroundings. It doesn't have to be a big topic, but start as soon as you can being a producer of content.
Oh, absolutely. I tell that to everyone. I say, even if you don't even know what you want to go to school for, just like do shit. Like just start doing it right away. Cause I remember a friend of mine, his kid is like, wants to go into filmmaking and stuff like that. And she knows that I ended up making a short a few years ago. And she said, any advice for me? And I'm like, it's a Nike ad. Just do it. Just start and do it. And you know, obviously you lived it. And so that little button that you see when you're watching TV that says AMS, I think the American Meteorological Society, what exactly is that?
So, being a meteorologist is kind of like being a botanist. Nobody really has control over who calls themselves a meteorologist or a botanist. A botanist studies plants, meteorologist studies the weather. But in order to get those certifications, which is AMS's American Meteorological Society, you can also get one called the NWA, National Weather Association. They now have something called the CBM, or the Certified Broadcast Meteorologist. These are all professional organizations which you have to test, and some of them have, which is crazy when you think about it. Some of them have peer reviews. So when I started to go get my AMS, I passed the test, and then I had to be reviewed by people, a board of meteorologists, for which whom some were on the board for which I was competing for jobs. So I was like, this is a terrible process. I think it's a bad process because television is so competitive, and this person has the decision if you get your seal or not. But as Steve Martin has always said, the keys to success: be so good they can't ignore you. And so it did work out for me, but it's kind of a crazy process. But the certified broadcast meteorologist, I think, really is, if you want to get into a market that takes weather seriously, you need to have that.
And just out of curiosity, how long did that take? Was that something that was a long process?
Yeah, I think it probably took me like 6 months to study for the test, and then you have to submit a tape that has a lot of examples of weather explainers, but television stations don't like you talking about cold fronts, low pressure systems, all these kinds of things. They just wanna know, is it hot or cold, and keep the weather very simple. So you kinda have to sneak in the science a little bit, and that took some time. So I'd say overall, it was about a year process to get the AMS before, and I had that by the time I left Denver. So, yeah, I had that pretty early in my career. I took it very once I decided whether it was it for me, took it pretty seriously.
Yeah, yeah, and that turned out pretty good for you as well. Yeah. So all in all, in terms of like AMS school, how long do you think that took you? I mean, I know you took a circuitous route around it, but like, how
Right.
long did it take you from like the start of when you said meteorology to then getting that AMS seal?
I would say probably 6 years. I mean, think of it this way, I was working at the time, I had children, I had a lot going on, and so maybe it took me a little bit longer than if somebody would have been totally fixated on it, but it is a process, like, it's not just overnight. Some people who are doing weather where it might be less serious, which I don't even know where that would be. I mean, in the old days, I would say like, "Oh, LA, they can have comedians. In SoCal, it doesn't matter." But now everywhere, it doesn't matter. I mean, even if you look at the meteorologists who've been there a long time, who might have entered as a soap opera actor or as a comedian, they have actually become students of the weather because of wildfires, hurricanes, massive mudslides, all kinds of things that require them to be very serious when the time calls for it.
Yeah, no, it is crazy how that has changed. Because I remember growing up in the '80s, there were people who were just like, "Hey, he's good on camera. She's pretty. That's cool. Let's put him in." And let's talk about the evolution of how important weather is to newscasts. Like you mentioned, when you first started doing it, is like, is it hot or cold? It's not that anymore. I've spoken to people in the TV industry. If you watch a local newscast and it's 28 minutes, 16 of it is probably weather. They're going to do one at the top, they're going to do one at the middle, and they're going to do one at the end. So let's talk about the importance of weather to local news. So as you know, I'm down in Charleston, South Carolina. I watch the local news. I kind of watch it with a bit of a laugh nowadays coming from New York because of how serious people took news and like the amount of people involved in the newscast. And here it's like two or three people that have been at the station for like 30 years and then like children straight out of college. It's so funny to see the dichotomy of ages of people in these smaller markets. I think Charleston's like in the 50s or something like that. But talk about that importance, the importance of weather to local news.
Yeah, I think it's essential. I mean, we can all of the stations that I've worked over the years from coast to coast, weather is the most important thing. When I was working in Philadelphia, WCAU, they used weather as a tool to try to beat the local station that was number one, and were successful at times, especially when there were hurricanes. When it came to Eyewitness News in New York City, I mean, forget about it. That entire brand is based on AccuWeather. I remember a great story right when I started at Eyewitness News. The news director called me in. He said, "Amy, sit down." He says, "Watch this." And he plays about 30 to 45 seconds of me doing the weather. So, "What's the matter with this?" I'm like, "I don't know." He's like, "What's the matter with this?" We watch it again. I'm like, "I don't know." He said, "Every time you're on the camera, you're going to say AccuWeather, the AccuWeather forecast, the AccuWeather 7-day forecast." And right then it was like impressed me about how important the brand was for the entire station. So, really critical, you know? And so from then on, I always said AccuWeather 7-day forecast.
It's funny how every news agent, like local news, they all have like Doppler X thousand, and they all have like these fancy names. But are they different? Because if you watch if you have like three or four local stations, everyone's going to have like a specific name. But in the down and dirty, Amy, is it all the same essentially?
Great question. Really good question. So sometimes it's all the same. For example, in New York, I believe NBC has their own Doppler, their actual own physical Doppler they paid for, they own. They take that data and they put it into the computers. But every other station relies on the National Weather Service radar. So it's the exact same one. However, there are pieces of software that you can feed that data into that's going to give you a little bit more specific details. So that's kind of different. When I worked in Chicago, this was a really big deal. I left Philadelphia because I thought I was going to live there forever. I love Philly. And I moved to Chicago because they said, "You're going to be the first meteorologist at night that's a woman. We've never had a woman do the weather at night on the main newscast. So you're going to do that. Also, we're going to get what's called a dual polarity radar." And this was back, let's see, that would have been 2008-ish. And a dual polarity radar is one that sweeps and looks horizontally for rain, but also reads up and down, horizontal, yeah, vertically, so that it can look at the shape and the size. And so that was purchased by the TV station. It was the first broadcast dual polarity radar in the country. And that is now the technology that the National Weather Service uses. But it's true, they're not all created equal, but most of them are created equal. So you got to listen really carefully to the promo and see what they're breaking down. Is it owned by the station, or are they just bringing you something that is a very cool name?
It's all marketing at the end of the day, right? They put like, I remember like during the 2000s, everything had 2000 of it. It was like blah, 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 2000. So everyone had something 2000, meant nothing, but it was just all branding. All right, let's talk about technology a little bit, because as you know, from when the time you and I were both growing up, the only places we can get the weather was if we popped on that local news at 5, 6 o'clock and
Right.
11 o'clock. And now we are attached to it. We could, or if you have a smart device at home, you can ask Alexa what the hell the weather's going to be that day. How do you
She's
think?
probably going off right now
I
because
know,
you
I
just
know.
said
Luckily,
ask.
I don't have one in my room. But like, what do you think about the way people now kind of like cut out the middleman, you essentially, to find out what the weather is? It doesn't seem like it's hurting the weather industry because, again, like we said, it's a big part of local news and obviously national news. So tell me about like the relationship of people's technology and weather and all that stuff.
We all want to believe we're irreplaceable. And so it's sad. Like I'm thinking, oh, they're using the phone to figure out the weather. But they've done studies that say, even though people look at the forecast, they see the numbers in their phone, that which is a handheld personal device, which right here, this is God, right in their hand, telling them what's going on. But they still want to hear it from a human. So for now, our jobs are safe to some degree, that people want to know what the weather is going to be from a human. I think it's also that, you know, you might find out the weather so that you can talk to somebody about it, but then you get in the elevator and you're like, wow, it's really cold outside, isn't it? It's like you want the confirmation somehow in a human form. And also, the numbers can only tell you so much. If I told you in Charleston it's going to be 75, that doesn't tell the whole story. Is it going to be a windy, cool 75 with the winds off the ocean? Or is it going to be a 75 that's perfect with the sun shining and it feels really nice? Or is it humidity? Is it the air coming up the south that's going to stifle you at 75? So there's some aspect that does make the humans a little still important. But yeah, I'm with you. A lot of people are turning to different ways to find out the weather. And some people just don't care. They deal with it once they get outside. The difference is it going to mess up your plans, cost you money, or delay you? That's really when people get serious about asking the questions about weather.
Yeah, no, that's good stuff. It is funny you talk about the competitiveness of it, and that there's only so many of these jobs, and I always liken it to almost like when you're like you have a chance to be a coach at a professional team. Like if you want to be an NFL head coach, there's only 32 jobs. Not everyone may want to be the coach of my beloved Jets, but if they have that opportunity, they're going to take it, no matter what, regardless of how shitty the team is. Because there's only 32 of them, and with weather jobs, if you want to be the lead meteorologist, there's probably two or three in every major city, right?
I
So tell me about like the longevity of these people, because the one thing I've noticed is people get these jobs and will work that job until the day they die. There's a guy in Charleston, South Carolina. I think he's been doing it for like 35 years. And so I think they call him the low country meteorologist. He's not even like the
The low
actual
country.
station yet. He's like the meteorologist of the entire Charleston area. And you've had to kind of deal with this in your career because to get that lead job in a major market, either someone's got to leave or let go, and then you jump in.
Mhm.
Tell me about these jobs that people get, and we have a mutual acquaintance in New York, Bill Evans, who is the lead meteorologist in the Eyewitness News for I think 20 something years as well before he left.
Least. Yeah. Yeah, you can talk about the legends of any market. You've got Bill Evans, you've got Sam Champion, you've got Lee Goldberg. I mean, I was working at WABC when Bill Evans left, and I filled in for him for 9 months, but then they ended up bringing back someone who'd been in the market for eons, for decades, and had Sam Champion do the job. And so the wait to see if you're going to get the main job can be almost an entire career. You've got Lee Goldberg, who's at Eyewitnesses in the evenings and has been there 20 plus years. So, it's true that this is a job that you can keep for a very long time. People like to have that familiarity with it. At the end of the day, you have to decide, is it worth waiting and waiting and waiting, or do you want to cash out? For me, I took the money and ran. I loved working at Eyewitness News. I could have been there forever, but I might have been there forever waiting for Lee or Sam to give an opportunity to have the main spotlight. For me, I liked working there. I didn't really need the main spotlight, but in other markets, just consider if you were in a lower market and you're waiting for someone to move so that you can earn more money. That's the thing. If you're waiting to get on the big show to make the money, you might be waiting your whole career to hit that peak of the jackpot of the money. So it's tough. I get it how it's familiar to the viewers, but I also get it from the perspective of being a meteorologist. It's really tough sometimes to wait it out. Sometimes you get lucky. They say, okay, we want to cut expenses. So they fire that, or not fire, but they make a change with the main person and they take them out and they slide you in. That doesn't mean that you're going to get the same money that the guy who was there before you got. So yeah, it's
And
it's a crazy business to understand it.
the way you've combated this is your very nomadic lifestyle. You and I could not be any more different. This, I think I've lived in two places my entire life. You lived in two places in the span of a few months. So you've bounced all over. So first of all, let's start chronological order. If you can try to remember in terms of that first weather job, city-wise, you don't have to name the station because we're already there. But like, name the cities that you've worked in over the past, 20-something years of your career.
All right, so I grew up in Southern Indiana, a small little tiny town called Jeffersonville across from Louisville, Kentucky. Then I went to school at Brigham Young University, which is in Provo, Utah. I worked for the college station there right as I was about to leave. Then from there, I went to Los Angeles. From Los Angeles as a production assistant, I went to Portland, Oregon, got my first on-air job as an entertainment reporter, and then I went into meteorology. From there, I went to Denver, Colorado, Intermountain, big Rocky Mountain climate there. From Denver, I went to Philadelphia. I remember my agent calling me and saying, they want to interview in Philly. And I'm like, which state is that in? Anyway, I went to Philly, from Philly to Chicago, Chicago to New York. I think I've lived in like 8 states as an adult because I did spend a little time down in Mississippi.
Eight
And
states.
probably equally moved in the 15 years in New York. I probably moved about 10 times
Oh, true. Yeah,
within
because
New York.
you're on apartments. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. I mean, that's one of the things that people don't think about when they, when they consider a career in entertainment,
Right.
that there is this facet where for you to, it's almost like like a lot of corporations, like you have to move to grow. Like if you want to get promoted in your company, you have to leave first and then come back. In a way, you kind of have to do that in the world of entertainment, that you just can't stay settled. Now, it sounds like this was part of you. Like it doesn't seem like you had a problem with this, because I think some people would have been maybe after like Denver be like, all right, I'm done. Like I'm either going to stay here forever or I'm going to find another line of work. How did you? How is this part of you, or was it something you grew into?
Good question. I think one thing that made it easier for me every single time was I'm Mormon. I'm a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Everywhere I went, I kind of had a group, I had a community, so I could easily gravitate towards that, which made it feel a little like home every time I went. Also, I'm a people person. I wasn't truly afraid of that change that needed to happen. Also, I got married very young. Was my first husband. I was married during a lot of those changes, so that also makes it a little bit easier. But yeah, you've got to buy into the concept that you might have to move. That you're going to move places, that you might have to work weekends, that you're going to have to work holidays. These are all things that are not glamorous.
I remember, I think I visited your apartment, one of your apartments in New York, and you have your bushel of children. I'm like, how are you all living in this like tiny little? It was the one over like on the West End or something like that. I was like, how is this even manageable? So let's get into that. The idea of you having this nomadic lifestyle as a swinging single broad seems pretty easy. Yeah, it's fun. But you did it with a family. So first,
Yes.
how many children do you have, and how the hell did you pull this off with all of them?
Yes. I got married when I was very young, and I was married for about 16 years, 17 years, somewhere around there. And by the time I got to New York, I'd been married a year or so. Maybe he was tired of moving. I don't know. But that sadly was the end of the marriage. And I had 4 children. I became really quickly a single mom in New York City. So this is when my kids were really young and sweet back there. Now they're old. Older. My oldest son is Tyler. I have Jared. I have Kate, and then William is the youngest, but he is 6'1", so he's hardly little anymore. So I have all the kids. 3 of my 4 children are adopted. Not a lot of people know that. But everyone was adopted at birth. And so by the time we got to New York, here I was with the kids, and I'm by myself living in I think it was like a 1-bedroom flex or something. It was a tiny apartment. And it was hard. It was really, really tough. And I will say this though. I have had colleagues over the years where they get to a certain point in their career, like, okay, I'm ready to have children. But then maybe they can't have children or something goes wrong. Like, you can't always plan how you want it to work. And I'll say this, I believe that nothing in my personal life held me back from being successful. If anything, I think all the things that happened in my personal life with my family still allowed me a great deal of success. Maybe those lessons like carried over to the person that I am, or my skill level, or my dedication, or hard work, or whatever. But being a mom never limited me from achieving the things I wanted to. So yeah, it was tough though. There were some times that were real hard in New York. That's true. Like, I'm living this glamorous on camera existence and everyone thinks it's so great, but there were some hard times. I mean, hard times financially bouncing back, hard times taking care of my kids, lots of stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, I never knew how you did it. I still don't understand how you did it, because especially the fact that you say you're a people person, but you're beyond people person, because I remember you'd fill in for the morning weather forecast, and then if anyone followed you on social media that night, you'd be at like a party, and or an event, or like a fundraiser, and then thinking like, how are you able to like wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning, do the weather all morning, then come back for the noon news, do something at night, all while you're juggling all this stuff. To me, I don't know how you pull off, but in a way, it's sort of inspiring to people who are maybe single parents to be like, they almost. And I don't want people to take this the wrong way, but like, use it as a crutch. You're like, I can't possibly do this in X career because I have children. It's like anything. If you put your mind to it, and certainly you put your mind, body, and soul behind it. But I'm sure you've had those conversations with people like Bill or other single parents, like, Amy, how the F did you do that?
Right, and it's so funny the perspective that you have, because in my mind, I'm thinking I could have done so much more sometimes, but I had one secret in all the places that I lived, every city that I lived in. The secret was I had to live close to the TV station. So, I always lived with less than a mile of the places that I worked, really, really close, and in the case of New York, I think I was, like, 6 blocks. So I think the secret to life with family and high demand jobs is you never have balance. There's never gonna be balance. Don't tell anyone that they're not, there's never balance, there's priorities. Don't tell them that they're not a priority, but you have times of the day, times of the week, times where the family is a priority, and you have times when the work is a priority, your friends are a priority, church is a priority. Wherever the priority is, you have to be able to see that priority and put it in that moment. And if you can do that, that becomes the secret. But stretching yourself too thin in one place or the other, um, if that only happens if you want balance. If you think you're gonna give everybody equal, that just doesn't work. And you have to sacrifice some things. I didn't have a huge house or a huge yard, but I lived next to Central Park, and I could be home and I could see everything. I never missed any of my kids' activities. I was always, like, there for, the play that they were doing at school that day or something like that. So figuring out how to prioritize versus balance, that is essential.
That's awesome. That's great advice. And so, full disclosure, I don't think I ever told you this. You were my first Mormon friend. Like I had met people that were part of those. So you were my first. And the one thing that is part of American culture is you can't have a good time without drinking. Like you can't be at a party without having a good time. Get a little buzz on. That's the only way you could like talk to people. But knowing you and being at events with you, I noticed that you didn't do that. And you still had a good time. So tell me about, and obviously it's part of the way you grew up. So it's probably just like it's second nature. But tell me about living your faith in a world where it's sort of quote unquote expected to party and do things that are probably not good for your body. Uh, how did you balance that? Especially, the cities you railed off they're pretty rocking cities like Denver, Philly, New York. I mean, they're LA. It's pretty easy to have a good time. So how were you able to balance those two things in your life?
Yeah, for the record, I've never had alcohol. I've never had drugs. I've never smoked. I haven't even had coffee, which is pretty weird for an early morning person. Had some workarounds for the early morning, getting up so early. But yeah, I think that that is a great point that some people think it's not possible. We're moving into an age where I think sober living and being sober is becoming more and more popular, and people are reaping the rewards of that. But for me, when I was really young, due to religion, also just due to my parents bringing me up, they said, we're not going to partake of those things. We're not going to be involved in doing that. And it's to protect your body. And so I bought in, and I bought in pretty hard. And so when I was in high school, my friends all knew that I was Mormon. They didn't even ask me to drink. They would all respect that boundary. And as time went on, you get to a certain point in your early 20s and people ask, oh, would you like something to drink? And you say, no, no, no. They almost like think, oh, that person's like getting sober, something like that. And so that they just don't ask you anymore. And then I remember there was a point, maybe I was about 25 or so. I would say, oh, I don't drink. I've never had a drink before. And people would look at me and first they go, I don't believe you. And then the second thing they would say, Joe, without fail, is, "You have no idea how much money you've saved."
Great point.
Because, I've never had the alcohol, expense. So, yeah, I guess it's a unique perspective. I feel like it's, thankfully one vice that I did not pick up and don't have to worry about. And can say right here, you can have a successful life without having chemical, things to depend on. And for those who are struggling with it, it is tough. It's tough, and you're going to ebb and flow. And luckily, there's a lot of tools out there that can help people. And like I said, I think there's kind of a synergy happening right now with books that have come out, podcasts that have come out, that people say, okay, I want to try something different, even if it's for a moment in time. Experiencing that sobriety, saving some money, and feeling your feelings, there's something to be said for it.
Were you ever like like the old Bible, like Adam and Eve? Were you ever tempted into And obviously going to BYU, it probably wasn't an issue, but like, and when you're socializing, were you ever like in the back of mind, I like this that way that martini cocktail. Oh, that looks really good. I loved it. Were you ever on the verge of like you said, you never did, but like were there moments where you really had to struggle with yourself?
Oddly, no. I think that's it's weird. I know I just had my very sugary Shirley Temple, which probably isn't a vice in its own. But the concept behind not drinking, not smoking, etc. They're like, oh well, there's some studies that say it's good for you. It's never really about what's good for you when it comes to that. For the religious perspective, it's more about addiction. And so the concept is trying to avoid things that can become addictive. So the concept for me growing up when I was very young is if you drank, then you might continue and that might become addictive and that may not be where you want to go with it. So never starting was just a way of not forming that addiction. So, and a lot of people think they can control it. As we know, there are lots of hereditary studies that show that's just not, it's not always people's willpower that can help them, completely avoid it. So, yeah, I don't know. I never started, so I never knew, and then it just got to be almost like a party favor. Um, I didn't start, so hey, I'm the oddball in the room. I don't know.
But like I said, it never seemed like you were never having a good
No,
time. So I guess you didn't
yeah.
really need it. All right, one last part of this, and I'll put a pin in this part of the subject. But in 2024, I think the most watched show on Hulu was The Secret Lives of Mormon Wives. And it's one of those funny things. Like I remember reading something like Hulu was so embarrassed by this that of all the content that they had, that this is the number one thing. So they didn't even put a press release. But yeah, you can look up the data. It was a huge hit for Hulu. So I want to ask you, as someone who's been living this life and follow this religion, is it funny or is it odd that people are fascinated by, even like me bringing up these questions to you? What do you feel like when an idiot like me asks you, or when you see popular culture like just eat up content about the world you come from?
Yeah, I think it's a double-edged sword. Some of it's funny, some of it's ridiculous. I never saw Secret Lives, so I don't know too much about it, but I can say this, people who are Mormon or members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, um, they're not they're not trying to ride the fence. If they're in it, and they're pretty much all in. People who are not, it's funny that they still cling to it, but then they're not practicing. I don't know. I don't really get that, but maybe that's all part of, I think, the sinner and the saint, right? We all want to be, or most people who are trying to attach themselves to a religion want to be the saint, but we're all sinners in our own right. So maybe there's something there. I always thought it was pretty funny that the Book of Mormon was a Broadway show and a very successful Broadway show. Everyone always says, "Have you seen the play?" No, but I've read the book. I try to be funny about it. But if you were to make an actual Broadway play about another religion and poke fun of it, like tell me how that would go over. I don't think so well. But Mormons have a little bit of a humoristic side to them that they can go, okay, we know it's a little bit peculiar and we can laugh a little bit, but we on our own intellectual level know the importance of the concepts. And so I think that allows us to be okay with people who maybe don't buy into it. I never feel like, oh my gosh, someone's making fun of me or anything like that. I do always find it funny that people are like, oh, do you believe in polygamy? And like anybody who knows me, they're like, you think I'd have multiple husbands? Like I'd really allow that? So there are funny parts to it for me. I find it I found it wonderful that people ask questions. I always want to talk to them about it. And it's funny, my mother, she's always been Mormon. She was born into the religion. And so her line of Mormon history goes back right to the pioneers coming from, over the boat from Europe and walking across the plains in order to get to the Salt Lake Valley for religious freedom. My dad's a convert to the church. So it was a pretty funny story how he became Mormon and met my mom. Is my dad wanted to play football. And in 1970, when he was about ready to go to college, was Kent State. And Kent State was equivalent to now when we have protesters protesting things, these young people going to clashes with the police. That's how it was at Kent State. Only the police shot some of the protesters, some of the kids. So my grandmother said, yeah, I just don't think I can let Bill, my dad, go to college. And her girlfriend says, well, you should let him go and he could go play football at BYU. They don't let those kids do anything. So my dad goes to BYU to play football. And he joins a men's club, which is kind of the equivalent of a fraternity. And they go up into the mountains and they're doing quick draw in the mountains. My dad shoots himself in the leg doing quick draw. He's fine. But the family joke is he couldn't go to Kent State because my grandmother was afraid he'd get shot. So he went to BYU and shot himself. There you go. That's the story.
And so how did he
So,
meet your mother? Your mom was a student there?
yeah, my mom was a student there. And so they met and got married at BYU. I was a BYU baby. And then they took me to Southern Indiana. That's where I grew up.
Wow, that's a great story. Thank you for sharing
Not a
that.
lot of Mormons there, by the way.
No, I can't imagine. Yeah, but like you said, like there's pockets everywhere. I mean, even in Charleston, one day I was driving down. I forgot. I know it was like Sam Rittenberg, one of the main drags in Charleston, and it was like, oh, there's Church of Latter-day Saints right there. I didn't even know that was there. I was who knew? So your people are spread out everywhere. But the one thing I often say, because I was raised Catholic, but I'm pretty agnostic now. I think the problem and the issue that comes with people making fun of Mormonism or even like say Scientology. I know it's not the same, but I think it's timing. The fact that the Mormon religion, I think, was in the 1800s, and then obviously Scientology, I think like the 60s or whatever it was, it's timing. It's because it came so late in the development of human history that people like can easily question it. Whereas a lot of the other, like the flagship religions, were all started like at the dawn of time. So no one questions them because they've been around so long. So I think the newness of it hurts newer religions more than anything because either people were more aware or more more, I guess, more educated, if for again lack of a better word. But I think that's probably what hurts them more than anything. It's just you guys were the newer religion, so you're always gonna shit on the newer religion, right?
Yeah, I mean, that has some truth to it, as far as Joseph Smith and restoring the Book of Mormon and making it organized religion in modern times for sure. And yeah, I think that definitely has some truth to it. It's interesting when you look at how people see it. Right now, Mormonism's the second fastest growing religion in America. But the irony is that there are more members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints outside of the U.S. than there are inside because it's a global religion. So that's kind of interesting. By the way, my daughter, Kate, she's my second. No, she's a third. Sorry. She's the only girl. I get them confused sometimes. She's the only girl, but she's on a mission for the church right now in East Los Angeles speaking Spanish.
Wow, that's
Yeah.
so cool.
About a year and a half, she'll be out serving, basically.
Where did you do your mission?
I didn't do a mission. I was already married by the time I was 19.
Oh, so that's why? Oh, okay,
Yeah.
I see.
Yeah.
So if you're
You
married,
have to be 19 to go for the girls, and I was already married by that time, so I didn't go.
what a great way to get out of the mission. Go get married.
Yeah.
You mentioned worldwide, it's pretty phenomenal. Are there certain countries? I mean, it sounds like it's all over, but are there certain countries where you see a higher population of folks that follow the religion?
South America, very high population of LDS in South America. So, but really global at this point. I mean, there's just so many places. I was in Germany last summer. I saw some sister missionaries who were there in Germany. I think we were in Cologne or something. So they were just walking down the street and they're like, oh yeah, we are here. And then we proselytize via social media. And then we go to the country once a week or once a month that they cross the border once a week or once a month to go and teach. So even countries that are not really open for Christianity or they have a lot of regulation, the LDS still have missionaries that are serving, helping, teaching, whatever.
That's so cool. Well, thank you for humoring me because to me, I'm always fascinated because I always try to be the person that doesn't judge. I'm just really nosy, so sometimes I cross the line. But I know you're pretty much an open book. But thank you for humoring me on that. So let's wrap this up by talking about like what we joked earlier about the fact that when you get a weather job, you basically stay there until they die or you make too much money and they get rid of you. What do you want to see the next 20-something years of your life look like as your kids are getting older now? They, not that they really depended on you that much. They seem like they were pretty self-sufficient. But what do you foresee like the next 20 years look like for Amy Freeze?
I cannot wait to be a grandma. So let me tell you right off the bat, when it happens, I'm going to be Grandma Freeze. I don't know. I should probably like claim the Instagram account now because my grandparents were so influential in my life. Both of my grandmothers, very, very influential. So I look forward to that part of my life on a personal level. On a professional level, I am working on some projects right now that are pretty They're pretty cool, pretty big. I think about 2025 is going to be the launch of a lot of that stuff early on. So I'm working on those projects right now. They have a lot to do with technology. I learned a ton when I was working at Fox Weather. So I'm going to take some of that I learned and apply that to my next venture. And then I hope to go back to the broadcast television world and do some projects there. I don't want to work forever, but I do love my job. I love talking about the weather. I just want to be able to do it in some different ways. And I think that the technology is already leaning us into some of this. And so I'm the person that's embracing it. I'm not a person that was sitting in a TV station like, we're never gonna, the apps are not going to take over, but I'm really into all of that stuff. So I believe that the technology world just opens the door for us to get more information quicker and more accessible to us. So I'm looking forward to all of that good stuff. I love New York. So even though I spend a lot of time in Utah now because my kids are more connected there, I also am still, got my place in New York. And so I'll still be around there. Do you remember when we first met? I don't know if you remember this or not. Brad Blanks was still doing reporting for PLJ, and I had met Brad at the Olympics. This is the very
Right.
first time I was on PLJ, was we were at the Salt Lake Olympics, and, I just chimed into his radio report. And then when we came back from the Olympics, I was working in Philly, and I would come up to see Brad, who was living across the street in the
In a
hotel. Do you
hotel.
remember this?
Yes,
Hotel
in a
Penn?
hotel.
He lived there for years, by the way,
Yes,
which
I
is
know.
probably pretty good because then you get the person coming to clean the room every day. But I saw him at Hotel Penn. Then I came over to PLJ. You were there. Bill Evans was doing the weather. This is when I was still in Philadelphia. And this was kind of my first real exposure to up close and personal media in New York City. And so that was really the first time. I don't know if you remember that, but that's kind
Yeah,
of
I
the
do.
first time
I
that I
remember,
met you.
and to me, what I remember was like one day you were in Philly, and then the next time I saw you, oh, I'm now the number 2 weather person in Eyewitness News in New York. I'm like, wait, how the hell did that happen? So it's again part of your nomadic lifestyle. You jumped in and around, but yeah, no, it was great. I know we ran a couple of races together. And
Yeah.
how many marathons have you run?
I've done 10 marathons. I've done more running of the New York City Marathon than that, but completing the entire marathon was 10 marathons. And then I did interview some people along, the route there for the New York City Marathon, which I love. I think we did, remind me, I think we did New York City half together.
We did,
Yeah.
yeah. And I remember just being really cold because I think it was
Yeah.
like in March or something like that. But yeah, it was really cold. But yeah, and I ran the New York twice. And I did. What was your best time? My best time was 4:10. What was yours?
Oh, you're faster than me. I think my best New York City Marathon was like 4:16. I never
Yeah,
broke
you're a
4.
celebrity. You're a celebrity. People were stopping you, waving. No one gave a shit about me running down. You were saying hi. You were kissing babies and shaking hands and stuff like that.
Oh, good times, good times.
Yeah. So if folks want to get in touch with you, follow your adventures, see what's going on with you in the rest of the year of 2025, where should they start?
All social media. You can find me on X, on Twitter, whatever they call it today. And then Instagram, of course, I'm there. And I think I put my email, so it's really easy to get me directly. I know I gave you my AOL because I'm still AOL, but that's only for my close friends.
Oh,
What
okay.
they'll
Wow. All right.
find on social media is Gmail.
All right. Awesome. And it's at Amy Freeze in most social media platforms. So, Amy, thanks so much for the time. Really appreciate it. Always great catching up with you. And I wish you the best of luck. Okay.
Joe, my pleasure. Good luck.
And that's today's Good Listen. Thanks so much for spending some time with me today. I know there's a lot of options out there, so thank you so much. If you want to connect with me, find out more about what I'm doing, go to joepardavila.com. But until next time, adios.